Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not quite sure how I got here, but I sense a great scouting spirit here in this place, and so I was drawn here like a moth to a flame. I suppose it is only polite to introduce myself, but before I do, I would like to tell you my story, in the hope that this great scouting movement, started so long ago, might kindle a wellspring of scouting spirit that strokes the fires within each of you, and indeed across this fair land. I was born in 1857, and with my father passing away when I was just 3, the 7 of us, including my mother, lived like paupers. Since we did not have much, my brothers and I resorted to the outdoors as our recreation. I learned how to make camp, build fires, catch and cook rabbits, sleep in the outdoors or an available barn, and just enjoy the benefits of nature. In 1870, I got into Charterhouse School on a scholarship. Some would say I still liked to horse around like I was still in the woods. I wasn't the best student, as I managed to sneak away from school to a nearby forest and enjoy the outdoors. I seemed to have a knack for theatrics and making sketches. It just came naturally to me, and was a great deal more fun. I didn't know it at the time, but these gifts would serve me well later in life. When I finished at Charterhouse, I expected to be accepted to Oxford University, where all my brothers had gone and my father had taught. Regrettably, not taking my younger schooling very seriously, I failed the entrance exams. By the look on the registrar's face, I had failed them badly. I may not have had a vision or serious goal when I was growing up, but I was no quitter. I determined to not let this setback dishonour me, my loving mother, nor the memory of my father. I then decided to take the exams for a British Army career. I only had a few months to prepare, but my vision was now clear. I immersed myself into the studies of mathematics, English, science, geography, and foreign languages. My hard work paid off, as I finished 4th out of 700 for infantry school and 2nd for cavalry. As a result, I was immediately promoted to lieutenant and bypassed the formal officer training. My first assignment was being posted to India. My time there was spent realizing the delicate relationships between officers and soldiers and how to lead and inspire men. By the time I was 26, I had been promoted to the rank of captain. I used my sketching skills and interest in tracking and scouting to gather intelligence for military operations. I also learned bridge building from the Army engineers and ways to improve camp life by making gadgets that afforded creature comforts. All along the way in my military career, I noticed that my units were continually receiving young men from the industrial cities of England, who had neither experience living in the outdoors nor the ability to look for and deal with an enemy in the field. In India, and later in Africa, I began to develop lessons for non-commissioned officers and soldiers about how to camp, how to track, and how to watch the signs of nature to be able to detect the enemy. This knowledge helped the young soldiers find a sense of confidence. Eventually, the higher-ups formalised my training and developed the first proficiency badge for the uniform for those judged qualified in scouting. They asked me what the badge should look like, so I picked the fleur-de-lis, which had for centuries marked north on a compass. This would be the sign of a trained scout. In 1887, I was sent to Africa and took part in several campaigns against the Zulu, Ashanti and Matabele tribes. It was in Africa that I would eventually come into possession of a long string of wooden beads. I didn't know it at the time, but when I started training scout leaders, the beads seemed very appropriate to give as awards for completion, for which they were worn with pride. My Africa service also brought me into contact with Frederick Russell Burnham, a U.S. Army scout who had served in some of the final Apache wars in the American Southwest. Burnham helped me refine the ideas for scout training for soldiers, eventually leading me to draft a training manual entitled Aids to Scouting for NCOs and Men. I was then promoted to the rank of colonel. When the Boer War broke out in South Africa, I was dispatched to mount a defence of the strategically important town of Mafeking. For 217 days we held the besieged town against an overwhelming number of the enemy. The war overall could not be counted as one of Britain's crowning achievements, so holding the strategic Mafeking became of utmost importance. Unbeknownst to me, the campaign was widely followed in England. All I knew is that we better come up with some kind of innovative approach to the siege. So I would downplay the impact of enemy shelling to reporters by saying, "Only 2 dogs were wounded in the enemy shelling today." And where I didn't have enough equipment, I'd run lights and guns around half the night to make it look as though we did. I kept morale up by leading some theatrical activities. The men all jumped in, eager to spin a yarn and act out a situation. Talk about acting. I directed my men to drive stakes into the ground to string wire. Being we had no wire, I told them to be careful to always step high over the stakes, so the illusion of a tough defence was maintained in the minds of the enemy. By the time the siege was lifted, they hailed our efforts and pronounced me as the most successful commander in the war. For me, it was all about being creative with what we had. Apparently, there were wild celebrations all over England, and when I returned, I got a hero's welcome. I was promoted to Major General and appointed Inspector General of Cavalry for the British Army. Much to my surprise, I also returned home to find that public interest in the Mafeking siege had led people to my published training manual. While the book was intended to train soldiers, I discovered that hundreds of boys, and even some girls, had been excited to read the book and hear about adventures in camping and hiking. They wanted to know how they could hike and camp and have adventures of their own. I had long believed that the teaching of outdoor skills leads to improved self-confidence, independence, and initiative. These ideas were also being explored in America by Ernest Thompson Seton and Daniel Carter Beard. To test if these ideas would work, I took a group of 20 boys camping with me on Brownsea Island off the English coast in the summer of 1907. The boys were from all parts of English society, and they universally loved the fun of camping and hiking. Brownsea Camp is now recognised as the first official scout camp. Imagine that. Following the success of Brownsea Island, I modified my military scouting manual with Scouting for Boys, which was published in 1908. The attention and fame I received as a result of the siege of Mafeking gave me the ability to engage influential leaders in England. Troops began to spring up everywhere, and by 1910 the Boy Scouts of America had been chartered. I resigned from the army and started a second career advancing my program for boys to help them grow into great citizens of their nations. In 1910, the first practical, hands-on version of Scout training for adult leaders was held at Gilwell Park outside London. As a memento of the course, each of those attending was given one of the wooden Zulu beads I had acquired years before. From those beads came the name of the course you now know as Woodbadge. You've heard a lot today about visions and the long-term impact they can have. Remember the hunting lodge and the acorns? They asked you to start to define your personal vision. They charged you with developing a ticket that will help you focus your vision to have a lasting impact on scouting. You're using high-tech tools and modern terminology, but these ideas aren't new. They have their roots in the very foundation of our movement. I saw in my soldiers and in my society the need to develop character, self-discipline, leadership, and a commitment to teamwork in young people. I drew on my childhood adventures in the outdoors and my military experience to help address that need. More than a century later, my vision has had an impact on the lives of millions of young people around the world. The tools you use have changed, but the vision is essentially the same: to help young people make ethical and moral choices over their lifetimes by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and law. I was born Robert Stevenson Smythe Baden-Powell, and I bid you farewell, safe journey, and the blessings and wisdom only God can give. May the scouting spirit dwell within you all the days of your life.